Uite, suntem live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Atlantic Black Sea Security Forum. We are very, very happy to welcome you on behalf of the Aspen Institute and the Bucharest office of the German Marshall Fund. This partnership has given us fantastic events over the course of the years, and I'm sure many of you have attended other events as well. My name is Clara Vorintiru. I'm the program director at the Aspen Institute for the New Economy and Society program, and together with my colleague,
I'm Radu Puchiu, and I'm the coordinator and the director of the Technology and Society program. And welcome from my side, and I'm really impressed of how many people are today. It's a full day ahead of us, with a lot of sessions, a lot of interesting topics, and hopefully we'll have a fruitful conversation around these important topics. Exactly.
What is the new security architecture of Europe after Russia's war in Ukraine, and the Black Sea Security Vortex, which is a very, very catchy title, right?
Oh, yes.
So without further ado, we give the floor to our president, Sergiu Mana, for the introductory remarks.
Mr. Mana, please. You are backstage, please.
Thank you very much. Clara, thank you very much, Radu, our president. Good. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Sorry for the slow start, but it seems it's because of the weather. As acting president of Aspen Institute, it is my honor to welcome you to the 4th edition of the Atlantic Black Sea Security Forum. The forum, which we organized together with the German Marshall Fund of the United States Bucharest office, is one of the main high-level international public events organized by Aspen Institute annually. We like to believe that this is a flagship, and it's a flagship not because of the size of the event, but because of the content of the event, and we plan to keep it like that. We are proud that for many years now, our public events provide an unparalleled continuous platform for multiple stakeholders dialogue, and that we always look at current and potential challenges, their societal implications and results. And we are trying, at least we are trying, to discuss concrete solutions to these challenges. Over the years, the Atlantic Black Sea Security Forum has addressed the most ardent topics on the international security agenda. This edition, unfortunately, will make no exceptions, as it will address as the main topic the European security architecture with the backdrop of the Ukrainian war. It is thus not by coincidence that the forum takes place in a period of defining moments for the Black Sea region and Romania, the intermediate operational capability of the new NATO battle group in Romania, with France as the framework nation, and also 25 years since the launch of the strategic partnership between the United States and Romania in July 1997. At the same time, the role of such a gathering, with its breakout discussions, debates, ideas, forecasting, and I'm pretty sure with a very heated coffee debates, will try to actually anticipate where to focus our attention, where to channel our investments, also our idea investments, where to build critical capabilities, and where to explore change. I see, therefore, not a time for a hyper-analysis. I believe, and we believe at Aspen, that it's time of urgency to anticipate the future and work a lot in trying to make the seeds for laying ground the foundations. That is why our event will chart key issues connected to security. We will go through energy security, food security, new tech, cyber resilience, fighting disinformation, societal resilience, or the European perspective of Ukraine, Georgia, and Republic of Moldova. Given the current geopolitical context, the 2020 edition will also include the Aspen Energy Summit panel. We are talking at the end of the day about security on all fronts. So we should expect that together we can chart and anticipate first and foremostly the key milestones on a resilience map. And talking about resilience, we should remember that our communities lay and prosper on solid ground of values. This is what Aspen is about. The current Black Sea vortex of strategic, political, economic, and competition of values will define the very character of the new transatlantic security architecture. Taking place roughly 1 week after the historical NATO summit in Madrid, our forum addresses the implications of the new NATO strategic concept, the new deterrence and defense posture on the eastern flank, and the future of the NATO-EU strategic partnership. The critical security dimension notwithstanding, let us remember that the very nature of the security and resilience we seek is critical. We seek security for our freedoms, for our rights, for our responsibility to forge open, trustful, confident, and forward-looking societies. That purpose will be achieved, shall be achieved, when state actors, international organizations, businesses, academia, the civil society, community at large shall join hands, minds and hearts to commit to the right for a secure, free, and prosperous life. It's a right which actually we need to secure. It's a right we need to defend. It's a right we need to nurture. That is not the role of only one actor. And free riding is a most dreadful sin when enjoying the benefits of a value-based society and the resilient national and international community. Resilience is community. Community is resilience. As for the resilience we seek to establish, it will inevitably face the question of format, decision mechanism, empowerment, representation, and enfranchisement for our institutions. I hope that will be the framework of a fruitful debate and ideas on changing the very nature on how we engage people, the mature and the youth, the affluent and those which would benefit of more societal investments, the conservatives, the progressives, and try to form common aspiration or common aspirations. I think it's very, very important that we will fight polarization with values. And that is the framework we will always need to keep as our north. All these are critical skills to be fostered and leveraged within the debates we shall hold today. So, let us look forward, build resilience while embracing, and why not driving change. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, I would like to acknowledge the relentless work of all those involved in the organization of a day like this, and to express our gratitude to all our partners for their contribution. As co-organizer, the German Marshall Fund of the United States, Bucharest office, co-funders, European Commission and NATO Public Diplomacy Division. As institutional partners, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania, Ministry of National Defense of Romania, Embassy of France in Romania. Strategic partners, Aspen Institute France, Aspen Institute Central Europe, Aspen Institute Kiev. As partners, OMV Petrom, Enel, Modex, Premier Energy and Publicis Group. And as supporters, Aqua Carpatica and Domeniile Sâmburești. What can we do without our media partners? Probably everything will stay within this room, and definitely when a conversation about values is being held, it's important that the world knows about it. Our media partners for today, Ager Press, Profit.ro, Profit News, Calea Europeană, and Kiss FM. Thank you very much for your patience with me this morning. I took 10 minutes of your time, and I hope we are going to have a wonderful day. First and foremost, a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sergiu Mana. What an amazing roundup of the main themes of discussion. Let me introduce now Sergiu Panainte, Interim Director of the Bucharest office of the German Marshall Fund.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of the National Defense of Romania, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Bucharest office of the German Marshall Fund, it is my pleasure to welcome you at the 4th edition of the Atlantic Black Sea Security Forum. Let me start by thanking the organizers, Aspen Institute Romania, our long-standing partners, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Defense of Romania, for taking the great effort to put together this important event. I also want to thank the European Commission, the French Embassy in Romania, the NATO Public Diplomacy Division for their invaluable support for the forum. After 75 years of peace and prosperity, Europe and the world are faced with an unprovoked war that Russia has unleashed in Ukraine. This war threatens not only the security of Europe as a whole, but challenges the very foundations of the security arrangements that allowed for peace to be preserved on the European continent. The Black Sea is yet again at the center of the military hostilities, placing all the countries around it in a position of great vulnerability. While the countries such as Romania, Bulgaria, or Turkey are NATO member countries, protected by the collective security of the alliance, Moldova and Georgia are not, and they could become potential targets for Russian aggression. Russian missiles are already flying as long as 46 kilometers from the Romanian border, and I believe nobody wants to fly them even closer. Eventually, and I very much hope sooner rather than later, the war in Ukraine will end, and the new security architecture on the European continent will have to be built, one that will not allow for a new war to start ever again. The first step has been already taken, as the NATO summit in Madrid outlined the new strategic concept for the alliance and has seen another two countries, Sweden and Finland, expressing the official will to join NATO. NATO is the security umbrella that has ensured for the past 73 years the security on the European continent. But it all started actually 2 years earlier with the European Recovery Program, or more commonly known as the Marshall Plan. Considered one of the most important, consequential, and unique American diplomatic initiatives of the 20th century, the US provided transformative humanitarian and reconstruction assistance to 16 European countries in the wake of the devastation of the World War II. The Marshall Plan gave hope to millions. Hope served as democratic counterweight to the spread of communism across Europe. The Marshall Plan contains powerful lessons both for Ukraine and for Eastern Europe today. Further on, I would like to highlight the work that GMF has done to support Ukraine and its civil society. GMF, through its civil society trusts, has rapidly responded to the needs of the grantees in a fluid environment, seeking out new funding from existing and prospective partners while also working to ensure the safety of current grantees in the region. New emergency grants have aided grantees to evacuate within and beyond Ukraine, offering relocation support and assistance, also supporting digital networks and platforms to continue their work in a remote location. Since the beginning of the war, the Black Sea Trust has accelerated grant making in our Ukrainian networks, disbursing 46 grants in the total amount of almost $1 million. GMF's first ever public fundraising appeal, the GMF Hope Fund, launched on March 10, has raised almost $50,000 to help Ukrainian grantees to relocate or to escape the war. Despite the fact that the current context is not appropriate for festivities, the German Marshall Fund celebrates this year its 50th anniversary. GMF was created 50 years ago through an initial gift by the German government to thank the American people for the Marshall Plan and to make their own unique investment in a stronger transatlantic relationship. As a living legacy to the Marshall Plan, GMF is committed to applying the same shared democratic values, generosity of spirit, and problem solving to today's global challenges by developing new policy ideas, fostering a new generation of transatlantic leaders, and just as the Marshall Plan did 75 years ago, providing hope in a time of crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, the security architecture of Europe is changing under our own very eyes, and this forum and its great speakers will contribute with knowledge, expertise, and ideas on what the new European security architecture should look like, what will be the mechanisms that will effectively prevent another aggression and will ultimately bring peace yet again to the European continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Panainte. I would like now to invite Mrs. Ambassador of France in Romania, Laurence Soyer. Madame Ambassador, merci beaucoup for what support.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Sergio Maenea, dear President, dear Sergio Panainte, the Director of the German Marshall Fund, thank you so much for inviting France, after 6 months of presidency of the EU, to be the partner, the co-host of this very important event. Aspen Institute in Romania has always been a very important think tank for us, Aspen Club in France as well, and I'm very proud that after rotating presidency of the Council of the EU from January and June, I can today open this conference. The semester, you know, was marked by huge challenges, consequences of the brutal aggression committed by Russia on Ukraine. During this period, and after 6 intensive months, we can say that on the part of EU, we have definitely given up on a certain naivety, in particular in security issues. And at the same time on NATO, we took stock of the essential idea of reinforcing the Oriental Front, our security in Europe. I am very proud of the progress we have collectively made on those two forums, on the two matters, and the fact that the two summits took place at the same time with no difficulty at all. On the two documents, the strategic compass and the strategic document of NATO, shows that we made a lot of progress between the two forums. And I'm particularly honored to have been here in Romania during this presidency. Romania is a strong strategic partner for France, this is obvious, but today it's also a country who has always tried to help create consensus, especially during those very complicated periods. Romania provided analysis, strategic vision, whether was it in the EU or in NATO, and today still when we are preparing the international platform to support Republic of Moldova next week. This was history in the making. 2 or 3 remarks to open our debates today. First of all, the common construction of European security. This is the item of our conference, and I will mention defense, I will mention as well sovereignty. We were, of course, trying our best to have what we call the strategic compass. I want to thank the Ministry of Defense of Romania, because it was a key partner to be able to get a consensus on a document which showed a broadening of our scope, what we considered as a necessity to reinforce our common security goals. And it is a decade document. It's not just a document that we were able to adopt on the 24th of March under the European Council. It is a strategic document which showed that we were ready to encompass, to take into consideration the new threats. Of course, this was a long work that we did bilaterally, but it was also something that collectively we managed. It was important to achieve that in March, at the break of the conflict in Ukraine, but it was also important to coordinate with the NATO strategic document in Madrid. And we are very proud as well that the two exercises combined did create the new condition of the European security in Europe. Of course, it was not about defense only. I will have to mention energy security, I don't want to, as we say in French, enfoncer des portes ouvertes. You are experts. You know that it was about Repower EU at the Versailles Summit. We did create a momentum in the EU to work about that and to be able to develop very, very quickly a response on the European independence towards Russian gas, oil, coal imports. At no time in the EU history we had such quick decision. Of course, sanctions, which include Russian oil, but of course, sanctions about economic individuals. Usually, when we say we take sanctions, it takes us ages, something like 2 years. In this very special period, we have had 50 decisions about packages of sanctions against Russia. At no point, I want to stress that as well, France was here to start to negotiate with Russia. We were, as we say in France, dans un bras de fer. The enemy was Russia. At no point we started to discuss about can we alleviate the sanction. The French presidency did the job, putting sanctions everywhere, in every sector, on every individual, etc. Of course, energy security aspects are not finished, and I'm very happy that you will have this geopolitical discussion, because we need, after we have approved in April a project which is called Repower EU, now we need to invest. Now we need to consider that our security goes through energy. Of course, we also have environmental objectives. We need to reduce our energy dependency to Russia by 2/3 by the end of the year, breaking it completely within 5 years. That's the objective, and that's the decision which we're taken. And we have to continue to have climate ambitions. At no point we thought that we could put aside the normal agenda of the EU, because all in all we have global challenges, and it would not have been worked without having a global agenda. Now I have to stress that we not only had those two elements, and we are working very hard on security and cohesion of the European Union. As you know, it was a political work, and it was also a way for France not to be the single country which, with the deterrence armament, not being singled out when we went to Ukraine with President Macron, Prime Minister Draghi, and the President Iohannis, along with Chancellor Scholz. Our idea was to open the door. We already announced in Constanza, here in this country, that those two countries should be granted the candidate status. And we managed 3 days later at the European Council on the 23rd of June to grant this decision. It doesn't mean that we forgot Western Balkans. Of course, as you know, I'm linked to the Western Balkan countries by the history. It was the first place I served as ambassador, but as well because we diplomats used to say, this is the last European war, and what is in front of us is of course a challenge that we keep unity and solidarity after this very strange period, and the security goes through NATO as well. After sanctions and after defense aspects, I would like to speak about maybe quickly humanitarian and food. There is an ongoing initiative. First is, of course, it was called Farmed. It's backed by the United Nations. Now we are working very strongly with what we call solidarity corridors. A big step was taken yesterday with Galatz finishing the capacity of the Romanian railways to be able to have the Ukrainian trains and going through the Danube to Constanza to get out the 22 millions of grain which are blocked today in Ukraine. This is a war tool as well, and we are not going to let it pass like that. And the same about the people who made us so emotional since the 24th of February, the people who made that our populations, our cities, our regions sent so much aid through Romania, by the way, towards Ukraine, could not be taken as tool, and they are very important in the EU. We don't want to reproduce the crisis we suffered on 2015 and 2016, which created a big migration solidarity gap among the member states. I think we escaped that, but we should still continue to work on over the 7 million of Ukrainians, women and kids, and open access to education, employment, social protection. Today we have 100,000 Ukrainian citizens in France and 90,000 in Romania. So we see that the challenge is common. We're not going to let Ukraine being alone with those populations going around. Finally, let me just say that in all periods, it was very important that we had a strategic position, and a strategic position which encloses the Black Sea. Black Sea somehow has been, since 2015, a kind of a black hole in our strategic position in the EU. Of course, I'm looking at my dear colleague from Turkey, member of Nato. I think this is the last point I would mention. We committed ourselves again on the security of the Black Sea with all its challenges, energy in the deep Neptune, oil, new possibilities, the capacity of being present in the Black Sea again with our military naval forces. And of course, as you know, as the French are here, and I would like to thank all my colleagues who accepted to participate today. There is one member of parliament, but also the Colonel Garrigou-Grandchamp. We are ready not only to be, as France, as a framework nation, we are also there to show that a NATO battalion or NATO brigade is ready to defend in all its aspects the security of the Black Sea. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ambassador. Very insightful and powerful messages from our introductory remarks. Thank you once again for all of your words. We're now entering the session for our keynote speakers, and I would like to start by watching a small intervention from Victoria Nuland, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs at U.S. Department of State, and I would ask my colleagues to broadcast the video. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the Aspen Institute, the German Marshall Fund, and all who organize these important conversations for this year's Black Sea Security Forum. I want to especially thank my friend, Mircea Joana, for his leadership at NATO and for his lifetime commitment to the Transatlantic Alliance. It's an honor to join you all virtually, though I'd much rather be in Bucharest than stuck here in steamy Washington. This forum could not have come at a more important time, right on the heels of one of the most consequential NATO summits in recent memory. When Putin shattered the peace in Europe by brutally attacking Ukraine, violating Russia's responsibility as a P5 member to uphold the UN Charter, Putin expected to find a weak Ukraine and a divided NATO. Instead, he provoked just the opposite. Rather than cowering in the face of Putin's brutal aggression, Ukraine fought back with incredible skill and courage, defending democracy for all of us. And in Madrid, NATO agreed to more forces, more funding, more members, more cybersecurity protections, and rewrote its strategic concept to explicitly call out Russia for its aggression and its coercion. Almost all the commitments that NATO made in Madrid come together here in the Black Sea region. Romania and Bulgaria can now count for the first time on having a significant number of NATO forces on land, sea, and air to serve as a powerful deterrent to future Russian advances. With more resources, NATO can now commit to more training, more exercises, and more modernization around this vital Black Sea region. And as some of NATO's most vulnerable targets for cyber attacks and disinformation, Black Sea nations should now be able to get more alliance support with their resilience and exposing Russian disinformation. Russia's continued assault across eastern and southern Ukraine has destroyed lives, families, towns, cities, and Ukraine's economy. Russia has also severed Ukraine's shipping access to the Black Sea, triggering another tragic consequence of Putin's war, the escalating global food crisis. Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, accounts for more than 10% of global wheat, barley, and corn supplies, and 50% of sunflower oil around the world. But every stage of Ukraine's agricultural supply chain, from planting to harvesting to exporting, has now been disrupted by Putin's war. Russia's attacks on silos and infrastructure, its reckless blockade of the Black Sea ports, and its blatant thievery of Ukraine's grain are contributing to food shortages, rising prices, and threatening millions of people around the world with starvation. We all need to speak out about what Russia is doing and not allow its disinformation around the world to turn the tables as to who is responsible for this tragedy. And we commend the work of many countries represented here today, including notably Romania and Turkey, to facilitate renewed Ukrainian grain exports, whether by alternate routes or safe shipping corridors. 25 years since we first launched the US-Romania Strategic Framework, it's clearer than ever that the Black Sea region is going to be determinant with regard to whether peace and democracy prevail or repression and tyranny become the norm in this region, in the transatlantic space, and globally. I hope that this forum can serve as a call to action to build on the historic Madrid summit and to strengthen our common defenses, our will, and our resolve. I wish you all a productive set of discussions and thank you for your enduring commitment to the values that bind us.
Thank you. Important messages indeed from Washington, but we need to move a little bit closer to our region, to the Black Sea and to the defense subjects. I would like to invite Mrs. Simona Cojocaru, State Secretary in the Ministry of Defense, Romania, for the Romanian intervention, please.
Your Excellencies, ambassadors, generals, distinguished guests, dear friends, I'm really very glad to be with you this morning in such a distinguished gathering here in Bucharest. And I would like to thank Aspen Institute and the Bucharest office of the US-German Marshall Fund. I think this is an excellent format for applied and substantial discussions which are very, very relevant today. It is already an acknowledged fact that Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is a strategic shock for European, Euro-Atlantic, and mostly the regional stability and security. The biggest security crisis in Europe since the end of the World War II is a reality check. We stand in full and unwavering support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and we condemn in the strongest terms the unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression carried by Russian Federation over Ukraine. From strategic perspective, Moscow is aiming to return to Cold War paradigm on security matters and to stop NATO EU enlargement beyond geostrategic strength from the Baltic to Black Sea. We can see that at operational level, Russia is looking to create a land corridor between Donbass and the mouth of Danube and take all majority pro-Russian regions of Ukraine. History was not supposed to play out this way. At least 12 years ago, when Russia was defined as a strategic partner in the previous strategic concept of the alliance. Russia is focused today in eastern Ukraine without putting aside its plan for the south. Odessa sticks into the Russian plans as part of the later stage in long-term military actions. From this perspective, the most dangerous scenario for Ukraine, Romania, and NATO would seek a land bridge towards Odessa and the connection with the breakaway region of the Republic of Moldova, Transnistria. As Russia will manage to achieve its military objectives in the eastern Ukraine, most likely its operational efforts will focus on the Ukrainian territories from the northwestern of the Black Sea. On this background, the risk for regional instability to extend could significantly increase, and that could create major concern for Romania. However, it is absolutely obvious that Russia could not keep up the intensity of its aggressive actions on long run. Russia's Snake Island retreat is a living proof in this regard. Nevertheless, we are facing a prolonged war, and we should be ready for an undesired reality on long term. For regional security, this is the worst-case scenario. NATO, EU, reset and repower. We have all acknowledged these past months, that apart from our shared interests and values, we acknowledge the importance to act collectively. I think all these months proved unity and determination. Strengthening the Allied collective posture, as well as the persistent and significant support for Ukraine, as well as Republic of Moldova and Georgia, particularly on resilience and defense capacity building, all these are essential. From this perspective, the NATO summit in Madrid is indeed a historic moment that ensured specific decisions on strategic importance with respect to the long-term adaptation of collective defense and defense posture. Practically, last week in Madrid, we witnessed the birth of a new era of collective defense. Moreover, it was set the requirement for further enhancement of the Allied forward defense on the eastern flank by scaling up the current Allied battle groups, including the one in Romania, to the brigade level. With respect to this, we commend with real satisfaction the commitment expressed by President Macron to build up the French-led battle group in Romania, as well as the statements of President Biden regarding an additional brigade combat team that will be headquartered in Romania as part of the increased US military posture presence in Europe. The decision on collective present adaptation are incorporating also the implementation of the new force model through significant increase of the Allied reaction force up to 300,000 militaries. The decisions on the Allied response to the immediate threats coming from Russia encapsulates also the support for the Eastern partners that are most exposed and vulnerable to the Russian malign and aggressive actions. A supplementary comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine, as well as specific sets of additional support measures for Georgia and Republic of Moldova, has been endorsed by our leaders. A supporting package also for Bosnia and Herzegovina has been endorsed as well. Terrorism remains one of the main focus of the alliance, including with respect to the challenges from the southern flank, such as illegal migration. China was approached in Madrid for the first time in the context of the NATO summit. The allies have set specific perspective on the matter as a result of the systemic and security challenges posed by a rising Beijing at both global and Euro-Atlantic player. From political perspective, one of the most significant results of the summit is, of course, the overpassing of the stalemate with respect to Finland and Sweden accession to NATO. Both countries are a real gain for collective security and defense, particularly for the eastern flank. Moreover, I would like to share with you the fact that summit deliverables have been completed by the endorsement of Charter of NATO's Innovation Initiative, as well as the launch of the NATO Innovation Fund, aiming both keeping the technological advance for the alliance. Of course, needless to say, it's absolutely obvious that NATO strategic concept is one of the main achievements of the summit in Madrid. Once in a decade, the strategic blueprint of the alliance provides the common perspective on the security environment, sets the fundamental tasks of the alliance, and guides on strategic objectives and priorities, defining the Russian Federation as the most significant and direct threat to the alliance. From Romania perspective, I would like to mention some important aspects included in this essential document, fundamental document for the alliance, and I will start with the fact that we appreciate the pragmatic approach on the relation with Russia. The reaffirmation of the collective defense as core and main purpose of the alliance, the strong commitment of the alliance to defend each and every inch of allied territory, the guidance on the adaptation of the collective deterrence and defense posture, the first time outline in the NATO strategic concept of the Black Sea region as of strategic importance for the Euro-Atlantic security, and last but not least, the importance of the increased relationship and support of the Eastern like-minded partners like Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, and Georgia. So, important decisions have been taken by our leaders in Madrid in this complex, unpredictable context in the Black Sea region with direct implication for security and stability of NATO. We have ahead of us a strong NATO, a solid commitment for our collective security, and a united Europe in this hard time of war at our eastern borders. Important decisions at EU level during the French presidency, and I would like very much to congratulate France for an absolutely important presidency this past 6 months. I would like to thank France for the leadership. Strategic Compass is indeed a valuable document that sets the EU role in security and defense for the future. So I will say it again: reset, repower, NATO in EU for the security and stability in Europe, on the Euro-Atlantic realm and beyond. Thank you very much.
And because one of the often used terms today is collective security, collective resilience, let us move forward in the Black Sea vortex with a video message from the Minister of National Defense in Georgia, Mr. Burchuladze.
Hello, dear colleagues, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to extend my sincere gratitude to be able to address you. I am glad for this opportunity to discuss the Black Sea security issues, especially these pressing times. I would like to firstly congratulate strategic partners and friends, Ukraine and Moldova, for being granted the candidate status for EU membership. Welcome the invitation of Finland and Sweden to join the North Atlantic Alliance, and along with this, remain hopeful for the realization of this historical perspective for Georgia on the same path. It is indeed a positive development in light of the recent hardship that our European family has faced in the form of Russian aggression. It is important to continue to stand united for the future generation whose bright future we are fighting for. Let me also highlight the NATO's Madrid summit outcomes, where the alliance clearly demonstrated the need for unity and enhanced joint efforts to safeguard the values we all share and reflect the way ahead, along with the measures to support its aspirant and partner nations. We welcome NATO's strategic concept that Black Sea region is of strategic importance for the alliance and their commitment to support the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of interested countries. This will be an important element of NATO's open door policy, an enhanced focus on Black Sea region in the coming decade. No need to reiterate that Black Sea region as an indispensable part of NATO's eastern flank, with a particular importance for the Euro-Atlantic security. Black Sea, which connects Europe to Asia, has a unique energy, trade and transit potential, and it should be a sea of peace and development, where nations come together and create synergies to enhance stability and prosperity. The transit routes through the Black Sea have great potential for the region, consequently for Europe to decrease energy dependency on Russia. Unfortunately, it is also the region challenged by Russia's direct military illegal activities, hybrid warfare, political and economic pressure. Following the occupation of 20% of Georgia's territory, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine has once again vividly demonstrated that European security cannot be complete without stability of the Black Sea region. So friends, it is the high time not only to stand, but act together. And the NATO's new strategic concept bears greater potential to do so with tailored measures to strengthen resilience and mutual defense. On our part, let me highlight that we have undertaken and implemented significant reforms in the recent years to further consolidate democracy and the rule of law, transform of our defense forces, and contribute to national, regional, and international defense and security efforts. We do so in accordance with NATO standards, principles, and values. Our progress has been recognized by our partners. Georgia, with its defense forces, next to yours, has been one of the largest per capita and overall contributors to NATO-led missions. We have sacrificed for our common security with sweat and blood. For a country this small, 32 soldiers killed and more than 300 wounded is never a small price. More so, despite the everyday threats from Russia and burning security environment in the region, Georgia is the largest per capita supporter to the Legion in Ukraine. Sadly also said, largest per capita in losses, with 14 killed in action. Having seen and lived the war, we stand by Ukraine and the Ukrainian people through financial, humanitarian assistance and rehabilitation of the wounded and injured soldiers and their families in Georgia. We are willing to ensure not only our own security, but to remain a reliable security provider for Europe. Georgia can guarantee that we will stand to protect Black Sea security with NATO and our EU partners. I hope to see substantial steps taken in the near future to advance Georgia's EU and NATO membership process. In the end, let me extend to you all my most sincere wishes for a successful exchange of ideas and fruitful discussions. Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Minister of Defense in Ukraine, Mr. Alexey Reznikov, who is live with us from Ukraine.
Participants of the forum, I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity to present Ukraine's view on the current regional security situation. I would like also to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Romanian people and my colleague Vasile Dinku for everything Romania has been doing for Ukraine. Many publications in the media and public events these days begin with a statement that the security situation in the region has changed radically since February 24. I want to add some context. Since the annexion of Crimea in 2014, Ukraine has been telling the world that Russia understands nothing but force. We have been telling the world that the non-response to the occupation of Crimea opened Pandora box. The de facto Russian occupation of the Sea of Azov and its attempts to occupy the Black Sea with the military exercises that closes huge sea areas that ought to be free for navigation was a test for the free world. The Kremlin has been brutally violating the laws of free and impediment sailing. The international community did not react. The Kremlin saw that it could go further. In my publication in the Atlantic Council in December 2021, I warned the international community that Russia's full-scale invasion would threaten global food security. Now, everybody is looking for a way to prevent the global food crisis. Therefore, the current crisis did not come announced. Moreover, it did not begin on February 24 either. The main reason was the absence of a tough response to the Kremlin's actions. Whenever Moscow sees that it can act with impunity, it continues the practices that had worked before. For example, we now see Russia openly pressuring Kazakhstan, the country that could strengthen European energy security. We have been telling the international community that Moscow has been using energy as a weapon for several years now. Now, Nord Stream 2 is a weapon. We now see Russia brutally blackmailing Europe by limiting deliveries through Nord Stream 1. It will continue for as long as it works. The Kremlin is holding a gun to the EU's temple. We need to waste words. We need to take away this gun. We need to break the energy dependence and ensure that the blackmailer never feels tempted to exert pressure or violence. Hence, I would like to make the following points. Firstly, to stop the Russians, one needs force and readiness to use it. A few days ago, Russia announced that it would retreat from the occupied Ukrainian Snake Island in a gesture of goodwill. In March, Russia retreated from Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions. Similarly, they had also tried to spin that defeat as a gesture of goodwill. These examples demonstrate that Russian aggression lasts until it meets with a strong resistance. The Kremlin is ready to compromise when it recognizes that the free world has the means and willingness to defeat the aggressor, the way Ukraine fights now. Now Russia is performing acts of terror on land and at sea. 37 battleships and submarines, 9 of them carrying Caliber cruise missiles. These missiles kill women and children in Odessa and deep within Ukrainian territory. Uncontrolled use of sea mines that reach Bosphorus, blockade and shelling of civilian vessels. All these are acts of terror. The terror cannot be stopped through diplomatic means alone. Russians must be forced to accept the rules of the free world. At the meeting in the Ramstein format 3 weeks ago, I asked my colleagues to develop a military support program for Ukraine based on the mission-oriented approach. Our mission is to deblock the Ukrainian Black Sea coast and to guarantee security in the western part of the Black Sea. To achieve this goal, we need to increase the capabilities of the Ukrainian naval forces. It is a comprehensive decision. Practical step towards this goal would be a logical continuation of the NATO summit decision to enhance the defense on the eastern flank of the alliance, including the deployment of new NATO forces in Romania. These steps need to be taken at the earliest opportunity. Now, this may seem inaccessible to some, but I'm an optimist because we have experience before our eyes. About a year ago in Brussels, when I was still the Deputy Prime Minister for Reintegration, a wise man and my friend Mircea Joana told a story. He's the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania and is now the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. He said that not everyone believed in its success in the beginning of the Romania's path to the alliance, but he was sure that one day his country flag would fly with the other flags in front of the headquarters, and it happened. I'm sure that Ukraine will be one of the cornerstones of NATO's security space. Second, for the Kremlin to retreat, we must demonstrate absolute unity. Sanctions are the best example here. Russia is now openly stealing Ukrainian grain from the temporarily occupied territories. From April through June, it had loaded 28 vessels with the Ukrainian grain. Part of grain is being delivered to we need to stop this. Additionally, Russia has been employing Rosoboron Logistica vessels using the gaps in the Montreux Convention. While the convention guarantees the freedom of passage to civilian vessels, these ships are a part of the logistics system of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. They have been delivering weapons, military equipment, material and technical support to Syria, Egypt, and other Middle Eastern countries. On their way back, these vessels can transport sanctioned goods, raw material, and more. We need to strengthen the sanctions to stop the transport of goods. This is where we need unity. Sanctions can only work then there is no bypassing them. There are no considering the two main ways of deblocking Ukrainian ports and protecting naval communications, one military and one political diplomatic. To accomplish these goals by military means, we need to block the opponent's actions in the northwest part of the Black Sea, including its airspace. Sea denial is to be accomplished by consistent implementation of the following tasks: complete destruction of the enemy presence on the Snake Island, including intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare equipment, destroying enemy naval groups in the northwest part of the Black Sea, protecting the humanitarian corridor with the coastal defense missile systems, and denying enemy naval groups access to the west of Cape Tarkhankut, providing air missile defense or civilian vessels and their convoy in the humanitarian corridor, strengthening the naval situation monitoring and target acquisition for the coastal missiles complexes is necessary for these steps. We must implement a variant of the A2AD, like anti-access and area denial system. And we need the help of our partners to create such capabilities. Another way out of the crisis would be a political diplomatic mechanism. It would envisage among other steps involving guarantor states in the form of a humanitarian operation. Russia's full-scale aggressions requires that we reconsider the critical aspects of a regional security. This is in the best interest of every country in the region. We cannot rely on the practices we used until recently. They failed. Ukraine is open to this conversation, but unity of efforts of the free world, we must make the Black Sea the space of peace. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good time to get a short coffee break, and we'll be waiting for you in 15 minutes' time at 11:15 for the Aspen Summit Energy panel. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I ask everybody to re-enter the room and to rejoin the event because we want to start the first panel of this forum of today. So please join us in the remaining seconds. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I'm very, very happy to be here together with you. I am Paul Cristian. I'm professor of the Bucharest University of Economic Studies. I'm the vice dean of the Faculty of International Business and Economics. I'm teaching to the University International Finance, so I'm very close to all these economic issues generated by the energy problems of today. So I want to introduce the first panel that is entitled Aspen Energy Summit Panel Session, European Energy Security, Decoupling from Russia while Ensuring the Green Transition. Before I will introduce the speakers of this panel, I want to highlight a few ideas, not so many, 4 ideas, basic ideas and important ideas from my perspective. The first idea is regarding the keywords of the panel. From the title, we can see that the keywords of the panel are the following: energy security, decoupling from Russia, and green transition. And I'm very convinced that the speakers of today invited to this panel will cover all these keywords with their interventions. Secondly, I want to say that the energy problem of today in European Union, it's a very simple economic problem. Entire European Union today is highly depending upon a single supplier of gas and petroleum and oil. And this is not okay for a simple business. It is not okay for a nation too, or a group of nations too. The third idea, it is a simple economic problem, but it is a very sophisticated political problem, because this supplier that has a monopolistic position in the relationship with European Union became to be very aggressive with us. So in this context, the political situation, it is not so simple. And finally, I want to say that in this moment, we are seeing that the economic context, the general context, significantly changed. And if I'm looking as a professor to the risk management theory, when the context is changing, you should revise the strategy. So when we are talking about Green Deal, when we are talking about greener European Union, for sure we should adapt, we should change the strategy, because the prices significantly increase. And my suggestion as economist is the following: do not forget to reintroduce in the debates, in the strategy, the economic argument when we want to have a greener European Union, because the prices significantly increased. And now I want to introduce the speakers of the panel. First of all, I want to say that we have 4 speakers. 3 of them will be connected with us online, and 1 of them joined here the panel together with me. And I want to say some technical issues before starting. I ask all the panelists to have an intervention at maximum 10 minutes, because we want to be in schedule with this panel. So I want to introduce now the first speaker. We have a change in the program. So I want to introduce Manuel Rivas Rabago, the Chief Economist of Directorate of Energy, General Directorate of Energy from European Commission. So Manuel, you have the floor. Please join us and discuss with us this topic proposed for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So first, just to say, I'm replacing Miguel. I'm Manuel Rivas. He is the chief economist. I'm leading the market analysis unit team in the chief economist unit. So just to introduce me and my real responsibilities. And I'm very honored to participate in this. I understand I have 10 minutes to talk maximum, no? So or 3 minutes, 3 to 10, I need to know exactly. Can you tell me 3 or 10?
Maximum is 10, so please.
So I'll be quicker than that.
Okay.
So I can only agree with many of the words that you said. I mean, here we have a problem which is linking energy security, it is linking the green transition, and we also have something linked to energy security, which from time to time we forget, which is the question of affordability or prices. And in general, this energy security and affordability, when the things go well, seem a bit detached. In the current circumstances, we see clearly how the energy security issues are affecting our price context and bringing prices to sometimes levels which are unprecedented and potentially unaffordable for a very important part of our industry in Europe, and also very painfully expensive for some of our households. I would like also to give a bit of context. It is clear that Russia, this main supplier that is on which many of our member states depend, has a key role there. But I know that maybe on that our colleague Sylvia will complement. That we have to look also at the broader picture. I mean, this crisis didn't start with the war of Ukraine. It was already starting with the after COVID, the after COVID recovery. At that point, we already saw that, well, demand was growing very fast, growth was increasing, and then the demand for energy, and then we were already feeling that some sort of unresponsiveness of demand, of supply, not able to catch up with that increase of demand. So we already saw after this summer a very important increase of the gas and the electricity prices, which are linked to the gas prices for technical reasons. The way in which we have the price formed in Europe makes that the gas prices set also the electricity prices, because most frequently is the marginal producer, and therefore we see that these prices in gas translate into prices of electricity, which are normally the double of, just to speak broadly, of the prices of gas. So we already saw these problems emerging before and at the end of the last year, and then there was a component, a geopolitical component, that was potentially increasing a bit more the prices, but definitely after the invasion of Ukraine, really we saw like the geopolitical component was really dominating this increase. I mean, harsh, brutal increase of prices. We've been through a period in which wholesale prices at some time during this period were 6-7 times the prices that they were historically. We are talking about huge increase of prices that has also translated into the final prices for consumers. So over the last vote down, we see that the prices on average, we have to think this is an average. So the average are bigger for some countries and lower for the other. But the average of the increase of retail prices for gas is close to 90% in Europe. Retail, the final end consumer. Also for we can see that for electricity it was close to 50%. So we are already talking about very high increases, not only for the industry at the level of wholesale, but also to retail for households and small industry. It's a real and very important crisis on prices, which is also now arriving to the transport sector with what we have seen, the high increases of the oil prices. So what I wanted to say is that we had this first stage in which there were some fundamentals which were driving the prices, and then after Ukraine, definitely it has been geopolitical. It has been geopolitical while the market was still well supplied. I mean, there were no big scarcities, but the fear to see an interruption of this supply, the fear that Russia decides to cut, was making that these prices were increasing to really unprecedented and unknown levels. So, but at that moment, the Commission had to take a decision. We had already taken some decisions in October where we started to produce initiatives which were bringing and explaining to the member states the possibilities that they had to mitigate the increase of prices and the impact on bills. Basically introducing a lot of flexibility in the system, giving guidance if necessary to have regulated tariffs, giving guidance if necessary to capture windfall profits, giving a general guidance also to improve the conditions of the market, and to provide some sort also of relief to consumers and to enterprises. This also included the possibility to reduce taxes and also to delay increases of prices. Many countries did so, le bouclier tarifaire français, and so we really gave a palette of options. But after the invasion, everyone came to the conclusion. First, the measures that are measures that we wouldn't like to keep for a long time because they are distorting a lot the market. And second, we could identify the clear intention of Russia of potentially using their capacity to create uncertainty in our markets, to increase the prices and use or weaponize their energy supply to us. So this is why we launched Repower in March, which is what our initiative that has been completed in May with a plan in which we have taken a bold decision, and I have to say it's a very bold decision, which is to replace our main supplier in less than 1 decade. All the fossil fuels from Russia should be replaced by alternative sources in just 10 years. And even more, we will try to, in just 1 year, at least replace 2/3 of these supplies when we talk about gas. So that's what we propose. It's a very bold plan. It's complicated to implement. It's not going to be easy. And moreover, it's something that we want that builds already on the green transition. We wanted to link it. The plan that Europe is proposing is not to abandon the path of the green transition, is to build on that and maybe to take some deviation for some years, but the objective remains the same, is to become climate neutral in 2050. So the plan, of course, in the short term, the main part of this plan will be strong diversification efforts, which means trying to replace the Russian gas through more LNG imports from alternative sources. At the same time, increase also little by little the pipeline supplies that we receive from other countries than Russia. We're talking Algeria, we're talking about Norway. In this plan, the US has a very important role. Has become the main supplier for LNG. The increase of supplies of LNG from the US has been outstanding during the first 6 months. I mean, I can look at some of the data now just to give you very, very quick idea of where we are. But now, if I manage to find my graph, we have replaced, until now, last year, we had imported 44 BCMs, billion cubic meters of gas of Russia. This is what we have imported now until June. This is 26 BCM less than we were importing before. How we managed to do that? Basically, because we have increased our LNG imports, liquefied natural gas imports, that comes from ships, by 60 to 65.5 BCMs, which is 25 more. So you see that the relations. Well, we also imported some LNG from Russia, but clearly we are compensating the absence of this gas. This is what we are doing. This was our plan, which recently is getting more complicated because what it was the fear to a supply interruption is becoming a reality of a supply interruption with Nord Stream. I will be quick. That, that was now the main way to supply Europe, which has been now reduced to 40% with accusations of Russia that because of the sanctions, they cannot receive the maintenance equipment and they cannot supply totally through Nord Stream. They have also cut some member states because we were not ready to comply with the Russian decree of payment in rubles. So we are in a third stage, unfortunately, in which this fear of supply, of interruption of supply, is materializing. And I think we really took this good decision in March, starting to implement this plan, because we see that these fears are becoming a reality. More actions will be needed. I have to say nothing now can be discarded. The situation is serious. And with this, I think I close and give the word to my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. We kept in our mind the idea of changing the terms, but the objectives still remain there about the Green Deal, the idea of diversifying the suppliers with gas and oil, and also the idea of cut-off taxes on a short-term approach of the problem. Now we are moving forward to the second speaker. I'm inviting Sylvia Bayer, Senior Energy Policy Analyst at the International Energy Agency. So Sylvia, you have the floor with the same request from my side. Please keep that limited time of 10 minutes for your speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good morning from Paris. Greetings from the International Energy Agency. Thank you very much for the invitation to the German Marshall Fund, the Aspen Institute. It's very nice to be with you among friends and former colleagues. I would like to come back to the historic moment that was illustrated this morning by the opening remarks and important speeches. The Estonian parliament just ratified Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO. And we really are hopeful that we count on a speedy progress by all the other allies. And that is a big change for all of us. The EU candidate status for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia is really excellent news. From the IEA side, we can say that our work was really driven by the consequences of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we have had a very clear program on advancing the clean energy transition, and this has really been a hard period for us all with regard to our collective energy security. So all of the work of the IEA in the past months have really been focusing on three key areas, and I'd like to highlight some of them. One, the turmoil in the global energy markets, how we can improve the resilience, the security for our members and partner countries, and particularly focus on the EU, of course. Then the second big part of the work is looking at how to get out of the regional security issues that are dramatic in the EU, and our partnership with Ukraine has been strengthened. And the third part is really around what are we doing in the next months on global energy markets? How can we rebalance? And so I'd like to go into these three elements with you this morning, and allow me to really highlight that this is a collective effort. And I think many of the speakers have mentioned that. In fact, very soon, on the 19th of July, we will celebrate an important event. The Ukraine will join the International Energy Agency as association partner. So Ukraine's entry is to be marked at an event in Warsaw, hosted by Poland's Minister Anna Moskva, and this follows the support by the IEA governing board that Ukraine has to be a member of the IEA, a partner, and that the association is a first important step here. Critical role will be played by the IEA to support Ukraine, and an action plan has been agreed to address energy security, energy transition, and the reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. Second, the IEA has been extremely busy to ensure that the global oil markets are in balance. And this started some time ago. In fact, on the gas market side, the IEA called out last autumn as one of the first the upcoming Russian aggression. And we were very clear about what would be the impact on the EU, on the gas markets, and we proposed measures very early on this year. In fact, working together with our great colleagues at the European Commission, Manuel and Miguel's team, and the European Council under the French presidency, we identified the critical measures in two what we call 10-point plans, and you may know that very well from the many discussions, one on oil and one on natural gas. We're also working closely with NATO, and surely that collaboration is going to increase as many countries are now also requesting membership at the IEA. So we have many new members joining us. Recently, Israel requested accession. We have a lot of partner countries. And as you may know, the IEA supports a large program, the EU for Energy program, with concrete technical assistance on energy transitions in the countries of the Black Sea region, Caucasus, and many more. So here we do a lot of work, and I can go into details that in the Q&A as you want. I'd like to really highlight this is a global crisis. It's true that the impacts are very, very high on the European side, but let alone if you look today at the emerging developing economies, they are also facing extreme poverty impacts, energy security issues all along. One thing I wanted to highlight is that, in fact, the IEA was created in the 1970s when we thought it was an oil crisis, and this was our measure and benchmark so far. Now this year we are talking about a crisis that affects the oil markets, the gas markets, the electricity markets, the coal markets, and the markets for critical minerals. So I think it is really important to have this in mind. So as the watchdog for global energy markets, and that includes critical minerals, we've been looking carefully at the balance and really trying to address the gaps. So we've been calling on OPEC Plus to boost production. And fortunately, at some point now, we see some signs coming out of this. On the consumer side that we have at the IEA, we have provided oil to the market through our stock releases. So member countries have agreed in April to make 120 million barrels available from their emergency oil stocks. That's the largest collective action in the IEA history. Comes on top of it, collective action that was agreed in March. So all in all, in the coming months, 180 million barrels of oil are coming to the market. That should help alleviate the oil price issues as well as local constraints on delivery and our prices at the pump this summer. I wanted to conclude my opening remarks by reminding what G7 leaders have committed to in Elmau and really give you an impression of what is to be done on the energy side. So there are 4 key points to keep in mind. One is looking at what and how we can reduce demand quickly, because the next months are going to be very critical on summer and winter preparedness. Same time, scaling up energy efficiency, renewables, clean technologies. So pretty much the EU Repower plan that Manuel has sketched out. But also, we have to lift all the global bottlenecks to energy supply. And that is something that we're working hard with our partners on critical minerals and boosting supply chain resilience across many markets in the world. So if we apply this to the Black Sea region, we can see we have to focus on increasing oil and gas supplies from existing fields, ensure the energy infrastructure is resilient, particularly the free passage of energy supplies, and NATO will play an important role here in the Black Sea region. And we have clearly a very delicate energy transition, which should not at all be now slowed down, but doubled down on. And these transportation bottlenecks are evident in the Black Sea. We see it every day, and that is what the region can really focus on. And we'll be very happy to work with all the partners in the Black Sea region, Caucasus, and many others in this very important area. Thank you very much for this time and your attention.
Thank you, Sylvia, for your presentation. We noticed that institutions are promptly reacting to the situation, and we kept in our mind your conclusions about increasing the efficiency, energy efficiency, about closer monitoring of the balance of the consumption of energy, and also look carefully for diversifying the supplies in the near future. Very interesting. Now I give the floor to my colleague here that is close to me, to Alessio Menegazzo, Head of Sustainability and Public Affairs, Enel, Romania. So you have the floor. Please
Thank you.
Express your thoughts.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be and to have, let's say, a little bit more sophisticated conversation within the Aspen community. So thank you very much, and I think the moment and the subject are quite important. So there are several commentators that said that, and I agree with them, that the aggression from Russia towards Ukraine was also having a link with the big European project, the Green Deal. And there is a reason in this, because at the end of the day, the Green Deal is saying that we will not use gas and natural gas anymore. And if you look it from the stance of Russia, which used gas as a geopolitical arm, to be said plain and clear, you are going into irrelevance, is not something that was on their taste, of course. So it's this, and with this comes also a discussion about values, because the values that we are foreseeing with the Green Deal are more and more electrified, based on renewable Europe, with a focus on customers and not on authorities and big companies, which is the essential revolution of the Green Deal, which is a democratization process, is also a discussion about values. So we can see and we can observe that those values that are diversification, sustainability, giving a democratization process in which the end consumer does not have only the duty to pay a bill, but to be an interactive protagonist in the energy field, are not something that autocratic authorities, states, do like, because it's a complexity that they don't want to have in their yard, and of course it takes out from their power. So it's about values, and I would like to see that for the future we do not do the same mistakes that we did in the past, not to partner with autocratic state that at the end of the day can use a commodity to leverage and have a strong impact on the other society, our society. And I really hope that also European authorities do not pursue a route that is about nationalization and saying that energy is a tool to control, not support, to control citizens and economies. Because we will replicate exactly the same mistake that brought us in the situation that we are facing today from a hostile country that is threatening our well-being. So this is something that I think needs to be clarified. The second fact that needs to be clarified is that energy has to change dramatically. As Miguel said, the marginality principle that was and is still dominating how the economics of the energy sector has to stop. Gas is the factor that is increasing the price of energy today. Energy, electricity, power is cheaper than gas. But due to this effect, the costs are high for everybody because we have this marginal principle that maybe at one point was a wise thing to do, maybe in the 70s, okay, in the 80s. Today, technology has a different, and technology drives decision. We don't drive decision via technologies. Technology drives decisions. And that technology today says that the cheapest way to produce energy is renewable, decentralized, okay, small amounts of investments all over the place, integrated in a digital network. This is the cheapest way to produce energy. Of course, we have a problem of intermittency. Unfortunately, we cannot get rid of gas today, natural gas today, unfortunately. But gas, for a certain period of time, together with nuclear, may help to solve this problem of intermittency. But the end point is clear. We will live in the next, hopefully, 10 years, 15 years, in a more and more electrified energy system, in a more electrified energy society that will have as a back renewable energy. Full stop. There is no other plan because this efficiency, it's wise and it's friendly for the customer. It's absolutely understandable that today we have to look at the short-term crisis. It will be absurd to say that we have to get rid of gas tomorrow. It's a nonsense, okay? But we do not ever have to forget that natural gas is what brought us to this crisis. And when we speak about threats, yes, we have the, let's say, economic threat, we have the military threat, we have the aggression of Russia, but we have also an existential threat. I don't want, maybe I'm Italian, I'm a little bit affected on what happened in my country last week. A glacier killed 15 people. So the target of decreasing the temperature of the climate, I don't like the word climate change because climate is changing every time. It's about global warming. This is the correct reference. So global warming is the existential threat for our planet. And security has to be applied also to this existential threat. The objective is to decrease the global warming. And again, we can do this only by investing in renewables, decentralized system, and more green energy. Because otherwise, we will be doomed. It's a non-subject. It's absolutely clear. So how can we navigate in this complexity? Because we have short-term threats, we have long-term objectives, we have different opinions. It's a very, very, very complex situation. It's a very complex system. There are big companies that, of course, I would not be very happy to be a gas company. Maybe in the short term, yes. In the long term, less. Because again, if we speak about network distribution, it will be strained asset. If we speak about production or extracting gas, again, it's not something that is sustainable for the next 15 years, let's say. So in the short term, there is a gain. In the long term, there will be a need to reinvent yourself. So again, we need to have a plan. The plan has to be clear. There has to be a methodology. There has to be clear objective. And we have to understand, and this is something that is very specific to the country, and something that I feel the need to clarify. So as many knows, the European Parliament allowed and agreed that you can put a sustainable label on gas and nuclear. Okay? This is a fact. It's happened. What does it mean? And I will again focus on gas. That you will able to use gas to produce energy, so to produce power, within certain parameters and within certain limits. This does not mean by any means that there is an encouragement to use gas to heat houses. This is a word that is going to be dead in the future. So if the Romanian state did allocate several hundred of millions in their budget to extend the gas networks, my suggestion, and I think everyone's suggestion, would be take those money and invest them in energy efficiency for the vulnerable customers. Because it's very easy for medium, high-level income people to buy a PV, to invest in efficiency, but for vulnerable customer, there is a cost to access. If you want a heat pump, if you want to invest in solar PV in your house, the investment is very good because you are not going to pay any more gas and less electricity, but the starting investment is high. So a wise policy should be to boost investment for energy efficiency for the most vulnerable customer and to the part of the economy, maybe small, medium enterprises that in Romania are suffering. Yes, they are a target, okay, but not to extend to waste money, because it's not investing, it's wasting money in extending gas networks that are going to be strained asset in 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. I really like the idea that energy is control, energy is power, because I want to add also another idea. Energy today, it's a fiscal vehicle effect for all the countries from European Union, because energy is highly taxed, excised. It's a luxury product, in fact, if we are looking to the taxation level of this energy. So yes, energy means control, means government intervention in our life, in our pockets. So we should also look to this problem from this side too. And I want to, because I see that Mr. Bușoi did not connect with us today. Maybe there is a problem with the program of the speaker. I want to conclude this panel with the following idea, that it's also my idea. Okay, we should decouple the energy policy of European Union from Russia today, but also we should recouple this energy policy and energy strategy with the economics, and also we should recouple with the real context, because I think that today this Green Deal is strongly disconnected from the context, and I give you the context. Russia plus China plus India are producing more than 30% from the total emissions, carbon emissions and other emissions at the global level. And we are, all of us, we are living on the same planet. Yeah? European Union is producing less than 7%. The entire emissions produced by European Union are equal with the Russian emissions only. Yeah? So think about the efforts of being greener here and buying everything from the other side of the globe, where nobody is interested to be greener at this moment now. Yeah? So we should reconnect this Green Deal with the context. Yeah? Romania, if we are looking to the emissions of Romania today, we see that we are not there in the statistics if we are comparing with the total situation now. Thank you everybody for attending this panel. The panel, yeah? Sorry? There's
one more speaker.
Yeah? Okay. So the speaker, the last speaker is connected with us. So I'm quickly inviting Mr. Bushoy to take the floor with this condition. Please be limited to 7 minutes. Yeah, with your intervention. Thank you. I will show to you my sign when the time is finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I will be brief as I am in the Romanian Parliament this morning in another conference. And thank you for not being able to be here from the beginning. This week we took a very important decision in Strasbourg, allowing investments for nuclear and gas, rejecting the objection of some colleagues from the Greens and from the left against the delegated act of European Commission. So I believe this also helped us to gain energy security and independence. Extremely important, extremely relevant, and one of the main discussions also in your forum, in your panel. I will briefly say a few words about what the European Union is doing in this direction, because energy is a key aspect now. It's a key discussion at the EU level. You know well, everybody is extremely worried about the possibility that this winter European countries could face a cut-off from Russia after the illegal and unprovoked aggression of Russia against Ukraine. The situation in the energy field became extremely difficult and extremely tense, and we should be prepared for the worst. This is something that unfortunately is clear a possibility. But European Union, and here Romania also, the countries from the Central East European region are acting, took some measures in order to mitigate, in order to reduce, in order to manage some of these dangers. The first measure is a very important requirement, and I hope that all member states will fulfill, and also Romania is on the good road but still needs to accelerate, is to fill the gas storages. At least 80% from the capacity to be filled by 1st of November this year, and starting with the next year, we are talking about 90%. And also the regulation is giving the member states the possibility to check the storage, not to have some gas storage in the wrong hands, also give the possibility to have common platform to purchase gas. And then everybody is talking in Brussels, and now we start to implement the Repower EU strategy. This will replace Russian imports of gas before 2030. First of all, diversifying the suppliers, LNG from United States, our long-standing partner or strategic partner, extremely important also for European Union. The increase of quantities from Norway, number two suppliers of European Union today and in the near past already. They increased the volumes with 6%, extremely relevant. LNG could come also from Qatar, from Israel via Egypt, and of course via pipelines. We could replace Russian gas with additional quantities from Azerbaijan, also very relevant for Romania and Algeria for the south of Europe. But the idea is to reduce the consumption of gas. That's why Repower EU is very concentrating on boosting renewables. 45% of the energy mix in 2030 should come from renewables. Also boosting, increasing the targets for energy efficiency, changing of behaviors, but also important investments in European buildings. Of course, this will come with a cost, but European money from RRF and other instruments are there to complement the national efforts. Improving and concentrating very much on hydrogen. 10 million tons domestic production, 10 million tons imports by 2030, creating the hydrogen market that we all need. 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane, helping also us to replace Russian imports. And of course, when we talk about renewables, it's wind and especially solar. Solar initiative, 600 gigawatts by 2030, installed capacity of producing electricity, and the solar rooftop initiative, putting solar panels on all residential, all commercial and public buildings, and on all new residential buildings after 2026, 2027. A very ambitious plan. Romania should look to this plan, should look to all opportunities, RRF, modernization fund, cohesion funds, and in solidarity with other member states, we could contribute to achieve energy security, energy independence, but in the same time to reach our climate goals. Thank you so much, and happy to be part of your panel. Sorry for not being able to participate from the beginning.
Thank you, Christian, that you succeeded to be with us. We kept from your speech the ideas about renewables, about solar energy, and about creating cheaper energy than today. And my hope is that Romania will succeed to produce gas until 2030 from the main offshore source. I hope that this will be done by us. Thank you everybody for this panel. The forum will continue with other interesting panels. So now we have a short break and we'll continue. Thank you everybody.
Good afternoon. Thank you for investing your time to be with us today. My name is Ana Maria Roman. I am a journalist for Antena 3 Romania. I host the program News Hour with CNN, and I'm deeply honored to be here today with outstanding guests to moderate this panel. So what will peace look like is the topic of our panel today. We are more than 3 months into the Russian aggression in Ukraine, like I think day 135. We have thousands of deaths, and we have 2,000 villages and towns under Russian control now, because we always talk about regions, but we never talk about the fact that there are 2,000 villages with Russian troops inside, and the population is suffering. So the main question now for the Western leaders is how to help Ukraine to end the war, and in the meantime, in the same time, to try to help and to save the worldwide economy. Because we have guests here from all over the world. We see the inflation rates rising, no? Some countries are already falling short on supplies, and Ukrainian economy is also suffocated. And we will try also to talk about possible scenarios for Ukraine from the frozen conflict, as the organizers name what is happening now in Ukraine. I mean the pressure of the long-standing, long-lasting war, slow-moving war, to the possibility of maybe a settlement, no? Or the worst scenario, the further escalation of this conflict. So I will present our distinguished guests today. Here with us today is Ms. Olga Stefanishina, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Ms. Stefanishina is in the Ukrainian government since 2020. She also has 13 years experience in European and international law. I think everybody knows her. She has been a voice from the beginning of this war, a voice for the Ukrainian people. She was live on television giving interviews even from shelters. So, Ms. Stefanishina, thank you so much and welcome to this forum.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here today.
In person, here today we have two distinguished gentlemen. We have Mr. Oleg Serebrian and Mr. Olivier Cadic. Mr. Serebrian, Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Moldova for reintegration. And I have to say that he's handling the dialogue with, between other duties with Transnistria. And we all know that Transnistria is a very sensitive area in this actual context. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Serebrian. And Olivier Cadic, Vice President of the Committee of Foreign Affairs from the French Senate, Committee also of Armed Forces and National Security. And Mr. Cadic is also the Vice President of French-Romanian Interparliamentary Group, Friendship Group. Thank you so much for being here. We also have a recorded message of Mr. Jan Lipavsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Czech Republic, and also a message from David Beasley, Executive Director, World Food Program. It's a very worrying message, so we will listen to that a little bit later. So we will go with the opening remarks. I have a humble request for you to try to limit the opening speech to maybe 5 minutes. And I would like to go to Ms. Olga Stefanishina. Ms. Stefanishina, we are listening.
Thank you so much. Indeed, the title of the panel itself inspires to a broader thinking or rethinking of the situation where we are right now. As you can see now, I'm not in a bomb shelter. I'm back to my ordinary office, from which on 24th of February I had to leave shortly after the beginning of the massive bombarding of Ukraine, which seemed so surrealistic in the 21st century. So before we can provide an answer to the question, as it is stated in the discussion for today, we have to find an answer to another questions. I would say why the war in Ukraine became possible and which lessons we should learn. And unfortunately, all of us, the whole democratic world, made a huge mistake. We believe that after the World War II, we managed to reach a consensus on indivisibility of borders, to establish a reliable foundation for the international law, because nobody would be able to imagine that the efforts taken by countries and international community to back up this message, no more war in Europe, will be undermined again in less than a century. The world has created institutions such as the UN, OSCE, which would European Union and NATO, which should have ensured the fulfillment of these norms, each on its own endeavor. We believe that conventional war will, with the massive destructions, massive killings of civilians, are impossible at all, because there are so many things which has been done to avoid that. And of course, we saw that this organization should manage any situation which might lead to some crisis. But we, of course, couldn't imagine that everything we just faced and tried to forget after the Second World War would be our normality in the 21st century. I myself, from the family of those who faced the horrors of the Second World War and the repressions of the Soviet Union, and unfortunately, something I heard from my grandparents becomes a reality. Now in Ukraine, we have the words filtration camps, massive murder, genocide, war crimes, and this is part of our reality. We do not select or choose whether we have or not have the fatigue of war, whether we react or not react to some crimes we face. We just live in this reality 24/7. As we can see also nowadays, the law is broken. Institutions are paralyzed. Russia, which is the aggressor, returned to the international and the right for military power, right for terror, right for thinking that there are no rules and conventions applicable to the situation they may invent over the night. We should be very clear, Russia's intention is not to gain some so-called security guarantees from imaginable threats. Today, their aim is to destroy the Ukrainian state as such, demolition of the Ukrainian nation. And this is the historic willingness of the Russian Federation, because Ukraine has always been fighting for its future, while Russia is now fighting for restoring back its past. But it's absolutely clear to all of us who have many times heard this message that Ukraine is not only fighting for its democracy and freedom, but for the democracy and rules of all over the world. And we can already see the massive implication of this war, of this unconventional war on the territory of Ukraine and the terror taking place. And we can see the implication of this aggression on the global world order. We see the multiple crises caused by this aggression, like the food crisis, major energy crisis, attacks to the sovereignty and informational propaganda efforts of Russian Federation throughout the area, massive bribery among different types of the officials throughout the different and very sophisticated, I will have to admit, instruments of the Russian Federation. And the biggest lesson learned already over these more than 130 days of war, that there are no more rules anymore. Unity for the sake of unity. This has been the religion for the many years before, and this remains a religion for many organizations like NATO or European Union when it comes to taking actions, but not the statements, to stop or deter Russia from the further aggressions. Negotiations will have only results if we, Ukraine and democratic Europe as a whole, speak from the position of force, from the position of commitment, from the positions of readiness to take any actions needed to stop this war, the aggression and the terror. And today, the balance of power is defined on a battlefield, but also by the leaders themselves. The institutions and conventions are not working anymore for Russia. They're not working and unapplicable to the territory of Ukraine. I can confirm it to you as a deputy prime minister in charge of international affairs and European and Euro-Atlantic integration. We have been calling on each and every applicable international mechanism to stop the war, to stop the massive killing of people, to hold Russia to account, or at least make Russia enforce any of its international obligation. Nothing worked so far. Any negotiations, whether it's food security, whether it's facilitation of bilateral talks, has not given its result. What we see is that at one moment, Russia is sitting over the table of negotiations with the UN on food security, and the other night there's bombing the largest grain storage in the Mykolaiv region, and simply now stealing the grain from Ukraine and releasing it through the third countries. No rules applicable for Russia. Only actions and the concrete force and a concrete unity is the lesson learned. But when we are talking about the peace is the new history that we're writing today. What I can say for sure is that we should not wait for the moment when the war in Ukraine is over. We should not wait for the moment when the Kremlin administration will be changed. We should be preparing ourselves for understanding what kind of place we are ready to offer Russia in the peaceful coalition of democratic countries, if there will be a room for Russia's transformation. We should be clear in our understanding and preparing ourselves to stand with Ukraine as long as it needed in terms of economical and military support to make sure that we prevail on a battlefield, because there's no other way to end this war without legitimization of those crimes committed already on our territory. So the peace may look like positive, and there might be a peace in Europe, only if we will start working for that now, even while the war is taking place on our territory. We should give ourselves the question to an answer: what kind of place we are ready to offer for Russia, how Russia should pay for the crimes committed in Ukraine, how Russia should be held accountable for that. And it is inevitable as a first step of showing Russia's commitment to transform and to contribute to this peace. And we also should stay united together within any formats, which could be also unconventional, to move closer to this victory. We see that now we have the Ramstein format, which has been proven to be the most effective and most rapid in terms of addressing the needs. We should not be hostages of bureaucracies, of something that worked before 21st of February. We should become the leaders, the people of action, while it's only way to proceed with any significant prevail in this war on a battlefield, but also politically. I also want to pay attention to the fact that the policy of strategic ambiguity has brought Russia to where it is right now, has grew up the ambitions and the hunger with which Russia has been so aggressive at this moment. And what we see is basically that we've been played like fools by these narratives Russia has been spreading throughout the years, which brought us to this message that we do not want to irritate Russia. For example, before the war started, Russia has been extremely aggressive in prohibiting, basically making any steps towards enlargement of NATO to Ukraine. There's been a discussion about protection of the Russian-speaking population, and this war has basically stopped the constant flow of the false narratives. No discussion on Ukraine and NATO at this stage. Russia has been bombing the Russian-speaking cities and the regions of Ukraine, and there's no narrative about any Russian-speaking population protection. Basically, everything Russia has been building, its ultimatums over the decades, is now irrelevant. So we have to understand that we should not be subjected to this manipulation, whether it comes to Ukraine or to your countries on manipulation with the gas resources. We should all think of the place we can offer to Russia, but we should start also from ourselves to build our sovereignty and clearance from Russian manipulation and Russian influence. And only this is the way how to make sure that we can see in any kind of future, whatever long it takes, the peaceful democratic Europe, and this is only in our hands. Thank you.
Mr. Stefanishina, thank you so much. I will go to Mr. Alexey, please, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very pleased to be today in Bucharest. Well, and you know, I have a dilemma to speak as a political scientist or as a deputy prime minister. I was, by the way, the first author of a Geopolitics of the Black Sea in the 1997, which was then translated in French, in some other languages. At that time, the subject was almost anonymous in the 90s, both geopolitics and the Black Sea. Now both geopolitics and the Black Sea are very popular. Unfortunately, the context is quite dramatic, even tragic. Well, the war in Ukraine changed totally the geopolitical landscape around Black Sea, and Republic of Moldova is among the most affected countries, probably the most affected country after Ukraine. From an economic perspective, we have lost our connections with Ukraine, first of all, one of the major economic partners, or well, they were perturbated, not totally lost, but heavily perturbated. Then with other major economic and commercial partners of Moldova in the Eurasian space, like Belarus, like Russia, Central Asia. And we don't know the costs of these economic perturbations. Then from a security perspective, Moldova is very vulnerable and very fragile as a country. We have an open conflict, a frozen but still open conflict in the Transnistrian region, strongly connected to the Donbas file, Crimea file, and other conflicts in the Black Sea area. They have the same genesis, almost the same genesis. Yeah? They were inspired by the same center, by the same post-imperial power in Moscow after 1991. The Russian military presence in the Transnistrian region is also a security issue, and President Maia Sandu said about that, not only in Chisinau, but also outside in different capitals. Another issue is the problem of the refugees. More than 500,000 Ukrainian refugees transited Moldova in the last 3 months. 500,000. 100,000 of them are in Moldova, so I understood that there are almost 100,000 Ukrainian refugees in France. Where is France and where is Moldova? By the size and economic power. Of course, the pressure is very high, and Moldovan society was very open, and we tried to help all these refugees, to accommodate them, to support them morally, and indeed was very enthusiastic support, not only by the government, by the society. Was indeed touching how Moldovan society was warm towards these Ukrainian refugees. Now, the biggest threat, I'll say, in the field of security is the reactivation of the Transnistrian conflict. Of course, the probability is low, but still, there is a probability that this conflict could be reactivated by mistake even, yeah? or if the Russian troops will advance to Odessa or closer to the Moldovan borders. Of course, I am permanently in contact with the de facto authorities in Tiraspol, with the chief negotiator from the Transnistrian side, with the de facto leader of the region. I was several times in Tiraspol during the last months, trying to maintain a permanent dialogue with them, and I've seen they are not interested to escalate the situation. This is very important, but again, the war has his own logics, and sometimes, yeah, the things can escape the control. Now, concerning the Ukrainian Russian-Ukrainian war and the post-war situation in Ukraine, you know, probably the most dangerous scenario among different scenarios. You have seen that there are a lot of scenarios concerning the post-war Ukraine. Probably one of the most dangerous scenario is the permanentization of the war. Yeah, like the Latins are saying, sine pace. Yeah, is an armistice without a formal armistice. Yeah, a war which sporadically could be reactivated in some areas. The societies are already tired, both in Ukraine and in Russia. But is a possibility, a probability, and for us, for the Moldovans, but I think for all East Europeans and Central Europeans, this scenario could be the most dangerous. And yeah, there is a probability, unfortunately. Again, another big problem for Ukraine, now connected to the refugees, is the demographic hemorrhage of the society. Ukraine in '89 used to have 52 million inhabitants, so as the second most populated republic of the Soviet Union. Before the war, together with Crimea and with the Russian-controlled areas in Donbass, the population of Ukraine was 44 million. So Ukraine lost already 8 million inhabitants. Now there are almost 7 million refugees outside Ukraine. I don't count internally displaced persons in Ukraine. And I don't put it here the population which was practically expelled from the Donbass area to some regions in Russia. So already we have 15 million Ukrainians outside the country. Yeah, this is enormous, and there is a danger that this trend could continue. Yeah, could grow.
So we will dive into that problem. We will see maybe Monsieur Kadik has some suggestions regarding the rising number of the refugees who are sheltering in the neighboring countries, in Romania, in Moldova, in Poland. There have been made promises to help us from the Western allies, President Biden, also from Germany. So we hope we will get some help from there. So, Mr. Kadik, we will listen to your opening remarks, and after that we will try to, discuss even what's happening in your strategy to maintain calmness in the Transnistrian region. Mr. Kadik.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and I would say that as Romanian did it in '89, you restored democracy. Ukrainian did the same. And like all authoritarian leaders, Putin feels threatened by those peoples on his doorstep who claim the right to self-determination for themselves. He's afraid of contagions. He reacts. And now, at present, the war has broken out on our doorstep. Today, we ponder what shape the peace that follows this conflict will take. Allow me to quote a French military leader, Marshal Foch. A people only perish when he loses its memory. So let's take back to the past. Where are we today? I think we are in 1938. And Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Japanese Empire are all trampling international law underfoot in their lust for power and domination. They defy the Western world. In their eyes, it is as decadent as its values, our values. So we could do some comparison. 2012, Xi Jinping took the reins of China for 5 years, then 10 years, and now for life. After Tibet, Uyghurs, you can see the camp. It gives you some idea about the past, so you see what direction they take. Remilitarization, with the promise of washing away the stain of a century of China's humiliation at the hands of foreign nations. Xi crushed any hope the citizens of Hong Kong had of living free. Xi has stated that the reunification with Taiwan would happen. He started predicting in a peaceful way, but now he forget peaceful. He also has territorial claims clashing with its neighbors. Now let's have a look to Russia. To Hitler, Austria was an integral part of the German Reich. To Putin, Ukraine belongs to Russia. In the 30s, Austrians accepted the situation, not Ukrainians. They are fighting. War crimes are being committed by Russian troops. History tells us that Putin's aggression and the action of Xi Jinping point straight back to 1938. Putin would not stop with the annexation of Donbass 8 years after he already did it with Crimea. We all know that. So today, our responsibility is to make that history doesn't repeat itself, assuming that it's possible. So all of us, members of the EU, are in the same boat. Romania proved it by joining the Takuba task force in Mali alongside our soldiers. I'm proud to see French troops here, ready to train with their Romanian brothers in arms and to stand together, ready for anything, as the Russians draw ever closer. Democratic nations must now openly prepare for war and revise the scope of their military budgets. The Romans taught us, if you want peace, prepare for war. The wonderful globalization born on the fall of the Berlin Wall has come to an end. We now find ourselves in a process of separation between the democratic world and the world ruled over by authoritarian regimes. The invasion of Ukraine constitutes an accelerator of the decoupling that started during the pandemic. Russia has excluded itself from the global economic system for a very long time. Russia, China, Iran all have imperialistic ambitions with common aims. They want to destroy democracy. We have to anticipate escalation. Defense of peace, freedom, human rights. It's our common cause. It requires sacrifice. We all know that. Our strength lies in our unity and our values. In the end, history has always proven it. No matter the path we have to take, those values, our values, always triumph against authoritarian regimes.
Thank you so much, Senator Kadik. We never negotiate on values. And this is something we learned from the history. And I would like to go now to listen to a keynote address, a recorded message of Mr. Jan Lipavsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Czech Republic.
Dear Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants of Atlantic Black Sea Forum. Thank you, Aspen Institute Romania, for inviting me to address this panel framed by an ambitious question: what will peace look like? Czechia has been very active in supporting Ukraine facing the Russian aggression. For that, I am very proud of my country. To answer the question of peace, we also need to ask, what peace do we want? What we are prepared to do to secure it? My answers would be, we do not want the kind of peace Russia wants. Putin's ambitions will not change. Ukraine has no choice but to fight. Ukraine fights for us and for our future too. We, the West, are key to changing the game. Peace depends on our help to Ukraine, on our choices. We must not back down, but we must face with dignity the challenges that lies ahead of us. We, as the Czech Republic, will do our utmost during our presidency of the Council of the European Union. I believe the latest Madrid NATO summit also offered some strong reasons for optimism. NATO and Western world stand united and resolved. NATO countries will step up their support to Ukraine. We named Russia as the biggest and longest threat to European security that needed to be contained. The value of NATO will be measured less by its declarations and more by the hard security that it is able to provide. Dear friends, let's hope that our choices will be right and that our will not fade away. Thank you for your attention.
So we listened to Mr. Jan Lipavsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Czech Republic, and we would like to go with some opinions on our topics today. We will try to analyze some of the scenarios for Ukraine. The first will be the global consequences of a long-lasting conflict. I would like to go to Ms. Stefanishina, Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Ms. Stefanishina, I understood your only option, your only scenario for Ukraine is that Ukraine wins, and that the negotiation until now did not show any result. So I would like to ask you what would mean for Ukraine this long-lasting war, this slow-moving conflict, and the second of all, do you still believe in the help of negotiation teams to reach maybe a settlement in the future, and on which terms? Oh, I understand that Ms. Stefanishina was talking on the phone. Okay, so I will come back to the room and I will go to Mr.
I'm here. Sorry, it was a president calling, so I always have to pick up. So if you could only repeat the question.
Yes, no problem. I was asking you what would be the global consequences of a long conflict, long-lasting war in Ukraine, because we understood that the only option for Ukraine is that Ukraine wins the war.
Well, as I've been saying, we all know what kind of future do we see, which is bright, based on rules-based order and the values and the well-being of people. And in the circumstances we have right now, we cannot afford doing nothing for that. We should build the future we want to see by ourselves, not being burdened by any conventional or unconventional instruments, not holding for something which is irrelevant in the past. We should act immediately and build this future by ourselves. Without proactive position in that regard, in terms of military support of Ukraine, putting restrictions on further isolation of Russian Federation, without making a brave and a strong decisions to cut the dependence of Russian gas resources and any other dependence from Russian Federation, and without putting Russia into a framework for reparations and legal liability for the crimes committed on Ukraine, nothing would work and fly in that regard. So any lack of proactive position of the leaders leading us to this bright future we all see would bring the whole world, not only of course Ukraine or countries around Ukraine or Russia, the whole world into the strategic unclarity, whereas Russian narrative of the absence of any rules applicable would become widely spread, not among democratic countries, but among those countries which democratic world has managed to hold in a specific framework for years. And this would be the opening of the Pandora box, let's say, for legitimization of the crimes taking place now in Ukraine, inspired and done by Russian Federation, for a broader international community which goes far beyond the democratic countries and the democratic camp. So if we want to overcome in this resistance, existential resistance of autocracies we as democracies, we should act, but not reflect or react to the crises. We should make sure that we act in a way to build the future we see, but not to react to the crises affected by the tyrannies.
I understand. I will go to Mr. Serbian. How do you see this possible negotiated settlement? You are a neighboring country to Ukraine. Both you have the EU candidate status. You have also maybe a vulnerability if Russia would decide to extend its invasion.
Well, first of all, it's up to the Ukrainians to decide how they will stop the war and when and how. They are heroically resisting against this Russian military aggression, and we don't have moral rights to suggest them something. So our wish is to see a fully independent, united Ukraine, and its pre-war, meaning pre-2014 borders. This is our wish, because if not, then we'll have a very dangerous legal precedent, the legitimization of an aggression. So this is our perspective, and I hope this perspective is shared by all democratic community, and not only in Europe, but also on the both sides of the Atlantic.
Mr. Kalik, how do you see how should Ukraine act in the furthering months? There are also opinions of Western world readers. Some of the opinions create the waves of controversies, or there has been opinions criticized by Ukrainian officials, like, for example, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who said that, and I quote him from an interview given to Reuters reporters, "We must not humiliate Russia, so that the day when the fighting stops, we can build an exit ramp through diplomatic means." I mean, this exit ramp would be, I mean, a humiliation to Ukraine, maybe a betrayal of the dead, and maybe a catastrophic end. So if you do you share his opinion, or what is your opinion on this matter?
Look at what they have to live. I went to Kyiv, end of April. I went to Bucha to plant trees with children just to restore hope. I went to Borodyanka. It's a massive disaster. And you will tell to these people that they have now to just say quiet, find a solution with Mr. Putin, but he will never be enough happy. He wants Ukraine to disappear. They have no choice. Did Putin ask you something before to invade again Ukraine? To Mr. Macron? I don't think so. He went there until the last time. He tried to avoid that. Now we are in the pond. And like in 1938, and I remember the debates Do we have to accept what Mr. Hitler did and avoid the war with Mr. Hitler? And I remember what Churchill said: you will lose the peace and honor. You will have the war and dishonor. And today, Mr. Putin has to have in front of him EU united with NATO, all together. We fight for freedom, we fight for our values. Ukraine is defending their countries, their freedom, and our values. If for any reason we believe that we can find a way to make a pact with Mr. Putin, it's the end of democracy.
And it would have huge risks for the future to negotiate with an invader. Before we will go to hear and to watch the message of Mr. David Beasley, Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Mr. Stefanishina, I will get back to you. I'm coming back to you, but for a very short answer, because we have these strange opinions from some leaders and also from some experts regarding this final scenario when Ukraine will cede 20% of its territory to Russia. We heard the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, talking about this scenario. So what is your message to those who are presenting this scenario? A short message.
Thank you so much. Any scenario we see by the end of the day is written by us and our international partners. So any capitulation is a no-go scenario for all of us, not only in terms of the aggression. We do not have any other room but to consider the unconditional victory as an option, because basically all the possible war crimes have already been committed to our territory and our soil. So we are ready to proceed with the scenario when we will restore peace in our territory, and we need support of international partners here. And these efforts combined would lead us to being the editors and the screenwriters in this agenda. If we're not united, if we're not doing 100% to overcome the aggressor, then the aggressor will be writing this scenario.
Thank you, Ms. Stefanishina. Before we end this panel, I would like to listen to Mr. David Beasley's message, Executive Director of the World Food Programme. He could not attend this forum because he attends the G20 forum that is held in Indonesia with the foreign ministers meeting, and he is bringing there the same message that he also sent to us, and his message is very worrying because he's saying we have 24 months before we will see famine all over the world and mass migration. Let's listen to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you for this meeting of the Atlantic Black Sea Security Forum. Thank you for inviting me. The war in Ukraine has provoked the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II, one that clearly threatens to spark a wave of destabilization and unrest which could overwhelm dozens of countries unless we act together to avert disaster. We literally could have famine and destabilization and mass migration. What do you think is going to happen when a country like Ukraine that produces enough food to feed 400 million people, and that's taken off the table? But even before the war in Ukraine, we were facing a perfect storm due to the effects of conflict, climate change, and COVID's economic ripple effects and soaring global inflation that you and I are seeing all over the world. Now, this war is piling catastrophe upon catastrophe. It's almost like a perfect storm on top of a perfect storm. The World Food Programme's latest analysis reveals that today a record 345 million people are marching to the brink of starvation. Now, this number has shot up from what was 276 right before the Ukraine war. And that's now higher than the 135 million that it was before COVID. Before that, it was 80 million people. And so we've gone from 80 million people 5 years ago, bumped up because of conflict and climate, to 135 right before COVID. COVID then, economic devastation around the world from 135 to 276, and now 276 to 345 million people. There's a real danger, in fact, that it's going to climb even higher in the months ahead. Even more worrying, though, is within that 345 million, within that group, there's a staggering 50 million people in 45 countries that are knocking on famine's door. In normal times, Ukraine is a vital global breadbasket. As I've said, producing enough grain to feed 400 million people who've gone from the breadbasket of the world now to the longest bread lines of the world. But the blockade of the Odessa area ports has left over 20 million tons of commodities trapped in Ukrainian silos, wiping them from the global food stocks just overnight. The economic and the social impact is being felt far beyond Ukraine's borders, as you well know, with food shortages, price spikes, and food insecurity shooting up across Africa, the Middle East, and as far away as Latin America. In recent weeks, we've seen social unrest triggered by food inflation in countries like Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Pakistan, Peru. History tells us this is just a taste of what's to come. If you remember in 2007 and 2008, rapid price spikes sparked protests, riots, civil unrest in over 48 nations around the world. And what's even more worrying is the long-term impact of this crisis, because the economic indices today are much worse than they were back then. Fertilizer and fuel price spikes, shortages are blocking access to these vital inputs for farmers on every continent. Without urgent action, food production and crop yields will be slashed in the next 12 to 24 months, raising the specter of multiple famine, not just a food pricing problem, but a food availability problem in 2023. The result very well could be global destabilization, starvation, mass migration on an unprecedented scale. And I can assure you that'll cost 1,000 times more. The international community has to come together to stop this looming hunger catastrophe in its tracks. First, we urgently need a political solution to get the Odessa area ports open again so Ukrainian wheat and grain can re-enter global markets. Second, humanitarian organizations need, of course, substantially new funding to deal with the skyrocketing levels of hunger that we're now seeing worldwide. Food price inflation means the gap between the funding we receive and the number of people who need our help is widening all the time. And just give you an example, our operations are now $70 million more per month just to stay even because of fuel costs, shipping costs, etc. Third, governments have got to resist protectionism and keep trade flowing across the borders. Stockpiles of key commodities also need to be managed so we can protect the vulnerable populations from starvation. Fourth, it's time to learn the lessons of this crisis and invest in resilience programs to help the poorest communities protect themselves against hunger. If we had successfully, over the past few decades, threaded this needle, the war in Ukraine would not have been such a disastrous shock impact upon the poorest of the poor countries. If we all come together and work together, we can still avoid the multiple famines that are threatening to overwhelm countries around the world. But we have got to act, and we've got to act now, because we are fast running out of time. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
So we have to act now is the message of Mr. Beasley. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but hard times are coming. What will happen, it depends on the governments and the way they will apply the strategies to help even the vulnerable population. I have to thank you for being here. I have to thank Mr. Panishina for being with us, Mr. Ebrian, and also Mr. Senator Kadik. Thank you so much for your presence, and I have to declare this session closed.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at the discussion, the Black Sea Security Forum, and I have the pleasure to have a very friendly discussion and chat with Colonel Flavian Garrigou Grandchamp, who is the senior national representative in Romania of the Ministry of Armed Forces from France. Colonel, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Radu, for the invitation. And I wanted to confirm that despite my mustache and my profile, I'm not General Berthelot's reincarnation.
Well, since you remind me of General Berthelot, a very good friend of Romania and an honorable citizen of Romania and of Romanian Academy, we will discuss about the French presence in Romania, about the NATO battle group, and about this historic movement that the alliance is making in those difficult times. Especially in Romania, France is the leading nation to the battle group of NATO in our country. How will you define this mission, and what can you tell about the present and the future of this military mission?
First of all, I would say that the Black Sea and Romania have never disappeared from the French Ministry of Defense strategic overview. Even if we had very few land forces on the ground, since 2014, the French Navy, one of the most present in the Black Sea, with at least 3 port calls in Romania per year. And we were even present in the air with some flights coming from France, surveillance flights, and from some maritime patrol aircraft over the Black Sea. So today, France is more present with more than 750 soldiers present in Romania. They are divided in 3 main detachments. The first one, the most visible one, is the battle group. So President Macron in January did announce the French readiness to be framework nation for the future battle group forward presence in Romania. And when NATO decided to deploy in February 24th its readiness forces to reinforce the eastern flank, by chance, France was manning this battalion. So we have deployed an emergency battalion in MK, in Constanza, and now this battalion, we have seized the opportunity to transform this emergency battalion in this long-term battle group forward presence in Romania. So he is manned by today about 360 French soldiers. He was reinforced by a Belgian company. The Belgians are currently disengaging and will be replaced by beginning of August by a Dutch infantry company. And the battle group was located in MK, but since end of May, his center of gravity has been moved to Chinku. So we have today a big half of the battle group in Chinku and a small half in MK due to the lack of place in Chinku. This battle group is subordinated to NATO through the multinational brigade Southeast. And it is training daily with Romanian forces and with other NATO forces in Romania in order to develop and increase its interoperability within the multinational brigade Southeast, because its mission is to deter any aggressor and, in worst case, to defend Romania and the eastern flank. So for that, they need to be able to work together. The second big detachment is a ground-based air defense Mamba system deployed end of May and on the coast of the Black Sea with about 100 French soldiers, and which mission is to survey over the Black Sea and to provide air defense in case of an attack. So mainly above protecting the region of Mihai Cogălnicianu Airport and Constanța. And so this Mamba detachment is also under NATO command. The third detachment is an engineer one. It is a multinational unit with about 150 French, 60 Dutch, 30 Romanian engineers, and as of beginning of August, 50 Belgian also. And this detachment is national, led by France as framework nation, and they are building the camp in Chinku for hosting and lodging the future, the battle group forward presence. So currently there is not enough place. That's why the battle group is splitted between MK and Chinku. But the aim is, as of November, to have built the camp so that the complete battle group can be grouped in Chinku.
Colonel, we have some historical, let's say, exceptional decisions made by NATO. It's for the first time the NATO reaction force was activated. It's for the first time the defense planning of NATO was activated. It's for the first time that we have a battle group in Romania and all the countries from the eastern flank. And of course, it's for the first time that Romania is hosting thousands of NATO troops. What are France's plans for Romania and for the eastern flank? How long will you stay in Romania, and how do you assess the threat coming from Russia in the Black Sea region, and of course, specifically with the war in Ukraine?
For France, the deployment in Romania is a long-term commitment. We are not here for 1 or 2 years. I cannot say if it is 5, 10, it will be as long as necessary. So the situation will command this deployment. And if you look at the Baltic states or Poland, the 4 battle groups for our presence are deployed there since 2016, if I remind well. So it's quite already 6 years, and it will last a long time. So I think it will be the same thing in Romania. So for France, it is really a long-term commitment to be deployed in Romania, and especially as a framework nation for the battle group forward presence. Regarding the threat, it's always difficult to say what real threat exists. Today, the situation is very difficult for Ukraine, but for Russia also. So it seems unlikely that Russia may attack a NATO country. But the unlikely doesn't mean that it will never happen. So we have to be ready, even if it isn't the most probable thing, we have to be ready to defend against any aggressor.
France has a strong presence in Romania, and I want to cover in our discussion the forces that contribute to peace efforts, defense and deterrence to the whole eastern flank. Are there land troops? Are there air force troops? Are there naval forces that are working 24 hours a day from France to ensure the security on eastern flank?
All components are embedded in this effort. So, as I told, the most visible one is the battle group. There are land forces. But the ground-based air defense system belongs to the French Air Force. And the French Air Force is also conducting some flights with fighters or surveillance planes from France over Romania. And the Navy, for sure, cannot send ships to the Black Sea today due to the closing of the straits. But some maritime patrol aircraft belonging to the Navy are conducting flights over the Black Sea from Crete. So all the components are embedded in this effort. And that's the same because France is not deployed only in Romania, but in Estonia, by example, it's the same with land forces, air forces taking part to air policing, and naval forces in the Baltic Sea.
France is an exceptionally important actor in NATO and one of the European leaders in NATO. What do you think we have to build together on eastern flank to have the same weight of defense and deterrence both in the west part of Europe and the east part of Europe? maybe infrastructure, maybe things that are missing, and we need a certain very quick plan to develop in Eastern Europe?
It's difficult. I'm not a specialist regarding capabilities. I would say that with different efforts, but we are all in front of the same challenges. We all see that for 15, 30 years, we have not invested enough in the military. That's easy for a soldier to say that, but that's the reality today. We see that the stocks for ammunition, for technical parts, for vehicles and so on are not enough. We see that a lot of our systems, of our technical systems, are old. So Romania did an effort since 2014 with an increase of its budget to modernize its forces. So it's ongoing, but that's very long to do it. France is doing the same, and we have seen for 3 or 4 months that quite all the countries are talking about increasing their budget in order to increase their stocks, their trainings, sometimes their forces, the number, because the number, one of the lessons learned of this war is that the number is a force in itself. Technology will not solve all the issues. You need to have many units also.
Everybody's asking when this war will end. And we have this hope that the military presence on the eastern flank will give a strong signal to Russia to stop the aggression, to end the war, and to come back to normal relations. Because before this brutal war, we had a NATO-Russia Council, we had diplomatic relations. Today, Sergei Lavrov left Indonesia because nobody wanted to talk with him. And we need hope from this military and defense and deterrence arrangement in the Eastern Europe to give the signal to Russia not to play with NATO, not to play with our desire to defend every inch of this allied territory.
So I'm not a diplomat, neither a politician. I cannot tell you how this war will end. For sure, our mission is to deter any aggressor. And in this case, to deter Russia to conduct an aggression against one of the NATO countries. So that's the first aim. Not to arrive in the situation where NATO and Russia will fight. But it will not end the war in Ukraine. For that, I'm not able to answer to you.
Okay, since you mentioned at the very beginning the brave and famous General Henri Mathias Berthelot, who was the leader of the French military mission in Romania at the First World War, he was making an assessment of the Romanian army and the Romanian defense in 1916 when he arrived here. And he made a list of certain needs for Romania to be defended. What do you think that Romania should focus on in these very difficult times of war? What is your list of assessment for Romanian defense to be a certain and a strong ally of France?
Romania is already a strong and important ally for France. And I'm not in position to tell to the Romanians what they need. For sure, and that's the same thing for each country, for France, Spain, UK, or...
What are the priorities on defense for NATO countries?
We have to train together.
First.
That's the first thing. We have to train together. Only no NATO country is able to win a war alone. Even the US in Iraq or in Afghanistan needed the help of the others. So that's the first thing. We need to train together and not to wait a war to train together. That has been done before. Second, yes, we have all to reinforce our troops in means, with stocks, as I said, with spare material. but we have to reinforce the resilience of our societies also, because the capability of our troops to last in a war will depend on the capability of what we call in French the back, the population. If the population is not accepting to have the risk of losses, of consequences of sanctions and so on, we won't be able to be efficient on the front line. So I think that's not specific for the Romanians, that's for all countries, but that are some priorities.
When we are talking about the war, everybody's question is if this war will expand, if they will try the NATO allied territory. And we see every day a very harsh and strong rhetoric coming from Moscow against the United States, against France, against any other NATO leaders. What will happen if NATO will be provoked militarily by Russia, and what will be France's attitude, because you are here with us in the first line of defense in the eastern flank, looking at aggressive Russia?
It's difficult for me to say what is a provocation. It will depend on each situation. But in case of an aggression recognized as such by the NATO North Atlantic Council, we will defend, we will fight. That's the only thing to do. There is no question about that.
We are starting to talk about sacrifices. We are starting to talk about preserving democracy, preserving peace. We were thinking that in the last 34 years, 32 years, peace is something for granted, and security also. But right now is the time to reinforce our solidarity, our allied missions, and to defend NATO both on the eastern flank or the western flank. It's one of the most difficult missions that NATO and France has since the end of the Cold War.
I would say that's not a NATO mission. That's a mission for all the governments to let the society understand that nothing is granted. You have to be permanently ready to defend your values and to act really, not only to talk about it, but to act to defend them. That's not a military question.
It's not a military question, but those are the times when everybody is looking to the military. Media, diplomats, civil society, everybody is looking at the military and says, are they capable to defend us? Are they capable to make the supreme sacrifices? And as long as I see, the answer is clearly yes.
Yes, for sure.
For sure. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our debate. Thank you, Colonel Garrigou. I hope that France will remain our strong ally in Romania, and that this mission will end soon, because we want the war to end soon and come back to peace. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you, Radu.
It was a pleasure.